Okay, first of all, good afternoon. Hope you've enjoyed yourself so far during the week. I'll try and keep this at a reasonable pace. But before I start, I'd just like to thank AWS for some fantastic toys, which apparently we can all take home. So, welcome. I'm Mark Hall. I'm Redcentric's Public Sector Director. Now, I've worked in and around government for close to 30 years. I may look like a teenager, but I can trust you I'm not. 17 of that devoted within the healthcare sector. All things around government communications, networks, services, etc. So, during today, we're going to look at the experience of Redcentric and what we've done over the last 30 years. Look at some of the sector challenges and trends that are currently prevalent around healthcare. After this, I just want to spend a brief period of time saying, well, why Redcentric? Why are we working with AWS, or why AWS working with us? What makes us different? It wouldn't be right before looking at HSCN without spending a few moments looking at N3. Why is there a change from N3 to HSCN? What is driving that approach? Probably the most key slide in the entire slide deck. What actually is HSCN? And when is it coming? What are the benefits of it? And what are opportunities for you as either ISVs or consumers within the new network? I'll touch on some of the assurance elements because that's significantly changed within the new network. N3 is a reactive or passive network, whereas HSCN is far more proactive. We'll then look at the transition timeframes from N3 to HSCN. Now, it's not uncommon. If you look across the marketplace at the moment, there's quite a lot of confusion about when that network's coming. And we'll clear some of that up. N3 network access via AWS is available now. So I'll spend some time on going through the design there at a higher level before wrapping up on how we're here to support you as a partnership. Okay, so over the last 30 years, Redcentric has delivered many significant projects, leading government ISPs, large cloud delivery models, and exceptional service desks or services. I won't go through all of these each in turn, but what I will say is that we've been connected to the N3 network since its inception. And prior to that, N2, or the original NHS net, which I'm sure some of you guys recall. I can see some nodding there. Did you really remember? Do you remember? Yeah, good man. Okay. Of course, we've made some significant milestones throughout that time before moving on to HSCN. Okay, so some of the current sectors and challenges, which you all know very well, but I'll spend some time on those. So, unification and collaboration. Over the last several years, significant progress has been made in bringing services together, not just, for example, within a trust, but across the whole healthcare sector per se. But there is still significant progress to be made, and that's what you guys in this room today are actually working towards. The next one, very evident, eroding budgets. Healthcare not so much, cash-strapped, but when you look at the social care side of things, it's not uncommon to see budget erosion of up to 48% within the next 2 years, so significant downturn in budget there. Complex assurance processes. If you look at N3 or health itself, I'm going to run through them very quickly. You've got the IGSoC or HIGCAPs, you've got LCAs, you've got ATPs, you've got the IGTs, you've got a whole plethora of certifications and standards that you must adhere to and demonstrate back to your authority. How do we simplify that? Overcapacity. Now, if you look at some trusts, for example, it's not uncommon to see N3 access, Janet access for academia, and PSN access all simultaneously. Can make for a very difficult management regime. Leading on to complex management, so you have multiple connections, multiple assurance frameworks, multiple management stacks. Not optimal. And of course, adoption of new technologies, very similar to the first point. People in this room, organisations in this room are driving forward future innovation. Massive work has been completed to date, and it's still going through. Okay, so why Redcentric? I did touch on the first point earlier on. N3, it's been around since 2001, 2002. Redcentric were connected to that network from a transition from NHS net 2002. We've been a long-time partner. And just to put that into figures, there's 50-odd thousand connections within N3. Redcentric currently provide over 27% of those. PSN certified. Everything we do, the network, the operations, facilities. Everything we do is PSN certified. We're a Janet Interconnect partner for academia. 2004, we're the first commercial party to connect to the original Janet network. 2006, first commercial party to connect into the new Super Janet 5 network, very originally named. And first again for the new Janet network. Industry expertise. As you'd appreciate, over 30 years, and we're not all old, we've brought in a lot of industry expertise. We have a centre of excellence across healthcare networking and government networking. When you look at standards, it's not just about the network itself. It's not just about ticking boxes and demonstrating you've actually ticked those boxes. It's about making sure that the entire wrap around that, your staff, your facilities, and the applications and services that support that are indeed standard-based too. G-Cloud supplier. Now, there's currently, I think, 1,400 G-Cloud suppliers, give or take. We're one of a very few. I think it's about 13 or 14 that have got the assured stamp. So you can tell we're very proud of that. That's okay. It means that the services that we provide into G-Cloud are stamped to above official. So we're looking here at official workloads. Redcentric has the ability to work above official. So the services that we supply are marked at secret or above, or can be. And full network assurance, as I said earlier on, we're connected across all of the government networks. So whether it's blue light, health, government, education, and indeed MOD. We believe in a consultative nature. It's not just about taking a set of requirements and delivering upon those. It's about working with you to actually build that trusted advisor status. So AWS and ourselves working with you to achieve that. And of course, very obvious, giving you that geographic coverage. So, where's N3 now? N3 turned on in 2002, 2003. The contract for it actually expired on March the 31st, 2014. After that, there was a 2-year rundown. Have a think of that. Okay, so it's very late. It's been an extension inside N3. So it's coming to an end. That's why we're here today, to look at HSCN. It was always a one-horse race. BT owned the network core. So if there was any faults with the core, any work to be done, bless you, with BT itself, or sorry, with the network itself, it had to be done by BT. It's a one-horse race. SLAs compared to industry standard, very low. The typical industry standard now for government networks is at least 5 nines. With inside N3, that typically top out at about 97.5, so very low compared to today's standards. And of course, very prohibitive from a pricing point of view. Now, I'd expect a number of individuals within this room or organisations within this room are centrally funded. But those that aren't, very expensive. And of course, lacks the agility. And that brings us on to HSCN. Why is it here? So the HSCN itself is made up of a number of components. So if I start from the bottom left, the peering exchange. The peering exchange, which I'll go into very shortly, because I'd like to make an announcement. Redcentric were awarded yesterday, or only this week, the contract to provide the entire HSCN network core. So that core will be managed and deployed by ourselves. And that is regardless of whether you are an NHS Blue Badge or a commercial third party. A very significant achievement for us. The exchange itself is built to withstand very high availability. It's built on MPLS design, so it can deliver multiple services concurrently. The SLA for that is 5 nines, so 99.99%. It's delivered across initially a 10 gig backbone, which will scale to 40 gig within 12 months and up to 100 gig within 18 months. So a number of incremental steps there. It is also designed to accommodate additional governance regimes. What I mean by that is, if you look at PSN, PSN will interconnect with that very shortly, as will Janet and PoliceNet and everything else, making a single peering exchange that will reach out to the entire public sector. Now, the transition network is fairly obvious in the name. How do you get from N3 to HSCN? BT have put a transition network in place. That goes live end of April, and I'll come on to the time frame shortly. And the purpose of that really is to ensure that organisations connected to N3 can map across to HSCN and vice versa. That network will stay in place until N3 is closed down towards the March 31st in 2019. Right-hand side, bottom layer, service provider. Now, there is a term for a service provider within the new network called a CNSP, a Consumer Network Service Provider. Now, there will be a number of those for the new network. Redcentric will be one, separate to the peering exchange, as will be several others. And of course, as customers of AWS, once that network has gone live and we've delivered it to AWS, you'll be able to take advantage of HSCN very quickly. Moving up a layer to advanced monitoring. Recall when I said that the N3 network was passive in nature? HSCN isn't. Any ingress point or egress point from the network will capture all traffic to and from the network. That information, and I'll spend more time on this very shortly, we pass to the authority for analysis using what's called the NAS, or analysis engine. What that will do, or the purpose of that device, is really to understand what the traffic trends are and look for attacks before they occur. Look at common packet payloads. We've got compliance. Now, through every stage of HSCN, or every component of HSCN is compliance. Whether it's the end consumer, a GP, an ISV, etc., right the way through the dev stack and through the peering up into the network itself. And I'll go into more detail on that very shortly. Okay, so what are the benefits? So, hands up, who knows the IGSoC process? Pain? Elongated? Yeah. Working with the authority? There you go. Okay, so within the new network, data has been extracted from the network. To connect into it, you go through a connection agreement, which I'll come on to shortly. But data protection is absolutely key, and the focus is now on the data itself and not the underlying network. Of course, there's more choice. It's no longer just BT. Now, under N3, you have commercial aggregators such as Redcentric, but the choice will be open further. And with that, of course, drives cost options. Additional services. N3 is, in essence, a flat WAN. Everything sees everything. That has its own problems. So, for example, if malware gets onto the network, unless you have the right controls in place on the consumer areas, that will go everywhere. Someone's crawling along the floor. Okay. Okay, you don't exist. Okay. This man doesn't exist. Okay, so as it's an MPLS network, it can support proper additional layers. So, for example, IP telephony, voice and video comms, cloud services can all be delivered separately without impact to other services. And of course, the most basic things that N3 didn't deliver, IPv4 and IPv6 stacks concurrently. The reach within the new network is significant. Security. I did say it's now a proactive service. It's about identifying traffic as it comes in, analysing that traffic, looking for trends. It's recognising that attacks will come in. It's about identifying them and mitigating future occurrences. Procurement options. If you're Blue Badge, with budget devolvement, you can buy HSCN from wherever you please. You're not now limited to buying it via BT CRM. Again, that links into the cost options. Now, it is a marketplace with multiple suppliers. The code of connection, be glad to see, IGSoC, gone. You have a code of connection. And for those familiar with PSN, we have the COCO, or code of connection. It's very similar. Okay? So I think it's 2 or 3 pages at least. That document will be published by the end of this month. And of course, improves collaboration. Look at the name, health and social care. It's about bringing it all together. So you have the local government, community. And of course, with that, you can connect into PSN and ultimately Janet, bringing again together that single government network. But if you look at that as a whole, what does it give you within healthcare? It gives you a better and a more secure, joined up healthcare. Okay, so from an opportunity point of view, it's obvious reduction in cost. But actually, before I go on to that, it's worth noting that the HSCN network is a 21st century network. Old term, boring term, we've all heard it before. But healthcare is a cottage industry. If you look at carriers, even people like Redcentric, organisations such as Redcentric, we've been delivering these sorts of networks for close to 20 years. And if you're a customer using commercial aggregation of Redcentric, you can already take advantage of all of the benefits I've already mentioned. But for those that aren't or are looking forward to HSCN, a big reduction in cost. Simplification in management. So where I said earlier on you had PSN, Janet, everything else all bolted together. You can bring that down. You can converge it into a single stack. So where AWS is concerned, you could buy one network connection using the Redcentric dropdown, and that could deliver you any one of a number of services simultaneously with the right controls in place, of course. I mentioned earlier on, that enables you to deliver overlay services such as voice, video, etc., which are currently not available properly within the old network. And of course, access to social care. Okay, so IGSoC goes, that is replaced by a new code of connection or connection agreement. 2 to 3 pages, who are you, what do you do, why do you want to access the network, it's approved and in you go. A very quick process, and aggregators or CNSPs such as Redcentric can validate that process going through, as we do now within N3. And where you have a process that may take 3 or 4 months within N3 through the authority, that process typically comes down to between 5 and 10 days. And we've been doing this for a long time. To say there's 20,000 connections we currently provide. To re-emphasise again, the code of connection or connection agreement is again only for the network. That is all it's for. It is not for the data itself. You will still have to demonstrate you have the right controls in place for your data or your dev stacks. Again, AWS will work with you from a cloud perspective. From an IAG point of view within health, Redcentric will take that entire role with you and work with you end to end. And it's about making sure that the network is accessible at all times. And I've just put a sub-note here actually, just to really emphasise that. Although when the network goes live shortly, and I'll go into that in a moment, it will not have access to PSN from day one. But very shortly after that, it will have access to PSN. So, if you're providing services to the healthcare sector, you can then start to look at local government too, and ultimately central government. Okay, so the security approach. 3 main areas. It's about the new SOC, or Security Operations Centre, which the authority have, working with NHS Digital's CareCert, the peering exchange provider, Redcentric, CNSPs and consumers to make sure that the approach is consistent. It's about analysing via, it says NetFlow or IPFix for the more technical in the room, all data as it enters and leaves the HSCN, to look for malware, commonalities, and put protective controls in place. It's about checking all internet breakout points for malware. And I'll add on that, so I thought I'll hang up. I will add on that point. Internet breakouts are going to be monitored by the authority, with the exception of whitelists and blacklists. We'll go on to that very shortly. Okay. Now, from a compliance point of view, again, there's 3 main points where the focus lies. It's about maintaining the availability of the network, operational availability. It's going to be there. 5 nines delivery all times. Highly resilient, geographically spread, multiple providers. It's about making sure it's there with the right level of performance. It's about reducing malware. So within the current N3 network, there are multiple filtering points. If traffic gets to one of those filtering points, bad traffic that is, it's pretty much got there too late. Within HSCN, it's about protecting the consumers by making sure that ingress and egress points from the location, for example, a hospital, is analysed on the way in and the way out. That way, you don't get traffic bleed between the 2 instances. And again, one more time, it's about securing the data and not the transport itself. Okay, so for internet firewall control, as it says here, all internet connections must be protected by a layer 4 firewall. So what? That's what everyone does now. It has to be a physical firewall, okay, so it's costly. Within the new network, a very slight concession, we can now run virtual appliances. So you can run it within AWS or any other mechanism. Those firewalls must, however, be configured with a rule set provided by the authority. So as a CNSP, as well as the peering exchange partner, we'll be handed a rule set which will go to AWS, which must be enforced on the firewalls as a minimum. At the moment in time, no one knows what that rule set is. It's probably going to be a default deny all, and we'll work from there, but that is unclear as yet. And those firewall rules are likely to be published or republished weekly, at the very least. When a CNSP such as Redcentric receives an updated rule set, we will push it to each and every firewall within 24 hours. So again, it goes back to this proactive approach. And I can see some scales in the room, because obviously within N3, you've got your own internet control. It's quite, I won't say lax, that's not the right term, but you've got your own control over the services. The authority is now starting to dictate, to a degree, how those firewalling rules will be put in place. Okay, service assurance is a massive part here. Under N3, I know I keep referring to N3, everything went to BT, you're under BT's whim. Okay, not a bad thing, but not necessarily a good thing. Multiple suppliers in HSCN. So you say the peering exchange provider, the authority, that's, say, for argument's sake, 5 CNSPs. They can it can be quite a mixed bunch there to manage. So within the new network, you have what's called the multi-supplier intervention model, which is managed by the service coordinator from the authority. And what that does is, that function manages individual suppliers and the authority and the consumers to make sure that service interruptions or performance issues are resolved to their satisfaction and indeed to yours and the NHS. Now, some examples where you may have multiple suppliers would be, for example, the peering exchange provider, us, and an issue with a CNSP. More often than not, however, the issues may be where you have an organisation taking services from 2 CNSPs or more. Or they may take connectivity from 1 CNSP and that's, say, for argument's sake, voice and video from another. It's about bringing that together to deliver best services. Okay, key stages. If you look in the press, a lot of organisations have seen it will be available from April timeframe, and that, as far as they are concerned, it will be delivered April the 1st. Not the case. With the news I announced earlier on, we can confirm the first few steps of where we are. The peering exchange will go live for testing late April. So it'll be in place in multiple data centres across the country, and it'll be there as an instance. Very shortly after that, we'll connect up the BT transition network and a couple of CNSPs. From there, there is a 10 to 12 week testing phase. So that means the first pilot migrations will be available from July. Now, one of the things we're looking at with our early adopters, for example, AWS as well, is how quickly we can make HSCN available for AWS and ultimately yourselves. So we're looking for, or from, a July timeframe. Now, if you look at the blue badge itself, early adoptions there are from September. And the full migration waves start from December. Now, a migration wave is a fixed capacity of Ethernet and broadband lines. Now, that's broken into 44, I think it is, Phil, isn't it? 44 areas. So, and they will ramp up very slowly with a peak migration between May and June 2018. What that means is, you know, the April the 1st, we're going live timeframe, and not we, but the NHS, isn't actually correct. So there's quite a lot of miscommunication in the marketplace about when it will actually go live. This slide, these timeframes have been validated and signed off by the authority. They are 100% accurate. The transition plan will be managed by us at your pace. So N3 is live in AWS, HSCN is live in, let's say, July. You require to connect into HSCN rather than going via bypass through the transition network. We will work with you on that. We will not mandate you when you can move across. We will not restrict you. We'll work with you to achieve that. However, N3 will turn off no later than March 2019. Okay, so that's quite a tiny slide to see here, actually. What this is here, this is the resilient gateway deployments for the Redcentric to AWS access for N3. The model for HSCN will be identical with an overlay. Now, the key points to see here are that resilience has been built in to a very high level. It's very scalable. The VPCs, being N3 facing, again, are very, very secure. Now, the onboarding process, this reflects N3, which is relevant now. This is where we are. I can see some smiles in the room. Everyone's been through the onboarding process. Okay. As a takeaway, what I'll say here is really then that if you work with AWS and you're taking N3 services through Redcentric. We will manage that entire compliance process for you, working with you. We will not throw you forms and documents and literature and say, come back when you've done it. We've done this for over 14,000 connections and over 400 other partners. So it's something we do very, very well. We'll work with you through that. And really, just to wrap up, really.
You got 10.
Sorry?
You got 10.
Okay, I've got loads of questions. I want to use that mic.
Okay, definitely.
Okay, so really just saying that managed network and health services for Redcentric is part of our DNA. It's what we do. We've done it for 30 years, and we know we're very good. As a customer of AWS using N3 services and HSCN, you have access to our industry expertise. I want to make it simple. Make it simple. Keep it simple, stupid is my motto. If it's difficult, why do it? That simplicity moves into your area. Absolutely key. Accountability and ownership. No sloppy shoulders. We do what we say we'll do. It's on the tin. And of course, to support your changing requirements. As you change, we change. And HSCN is just one of those changes. A quick slide here just around our accreditations. I won't dig too much into this, but basically all of the relevant ISO standards as you'd expect, government standards, healthcare standards. We sit on a number of NHS boards with the authority, etc. Fuel benefit says they're Bill 4. It's the old standard, as you know, but we do support above the old Bill 4 or official levels.
Mike, it was fascinating. Mark, sorry. How John Griffiths from Department of International Trade. Really interested to know, connecting to N3 has never been straightforward. I don't quite get, does that mean if you subscribe to AWS that you can have access through to N3 without going through the route?
No. If you look at N3 now, we've been given the responsibility by the authority to vet, onboard, ultimately approve or disapprove organisations wishing to connect. So if you look at ourselves, we've got 14,000 Ethernet circuits within N3 and about 5,000 tokenised or remote access. I would say 70% of those have come through our equivalent of IGSoC. So basically what they've done is they've looked at our standards, look at what we do, we've defined working with the authority an approval process to connect. They've given us some mandates, of course, as you'd expect. So what we do is, let's give you an example. You haven't got access to N3. How do I get access to N3? What I'll do is I'll put some stuff in AWS. I'm going to select the little box that says Redcentric N3. But what does that mean? Right. When you do that, we get notification and it says, customer wants to connect to N3. We contact you. We ask you for a couple of things. Why do you want to connect? Who's your sponsor? Which is similar to the IGSoC. From that point on, you come through our approval process. It doesn't go off to the authority. It doesn't have to sit in leads for 6 months. It comes through our own dedicated IG team. We measure, we validate, and we prove. And from then, we give you an ATP, and off you go. So you do have to go for the process, but it's not the authority's one. Now, for a numbers point of view, our SLA on turning around an ATP for application, as long as you have the controls listed, as long as you have the documentation or inputs in place, is 28 days. We've done it in 2 days. Our typical is between 5 and 10. So yes, the same process applies. We've been doing this for a long time, and our experience and knowledge, and obviously the trust from the authority, takes you through that process very efficiently.
Yeah. How much does it cost to be connected to on that way to the network for a year?
It costs from a recurring cost model. Well, I'm going to defer that to my colleague Anton Murphy at the back in a second. But what I will add before I do that, is that okay, Anton? Yeah. But before I do that, what I will say is there are no costs for onboard. So you don't get charged for the PS work or going through the application process or the validation. That is entirely free of charge because the benefit is for a customer or an organisation to get access to the network. It's probably not the right time to ask the question. So would it be okay maybe to pick up afterwards?
Hi, I'm Alistair. I'm trying to launch a startup in the domiciliary care space, a tracking app for carers to use. So I'm quite new to all of this, so apologies if it's quite a sort of noob question, but The social element of the new network, what changes will that bring? Will there be more social care providers onto the network? What changes do you see happening there?
Two things. There's a compliance framework for health, which is changing. There's a compliance framework for PSN. They will ultimately come together. So if you can connect into the network, you can comply full stop. Now, for offering services, you'll have reachability to social care straight away. That is expected to be within 12 to 18 months. So if you have a service, that can be offered for consumption into local government pretty much from then onwards. So it gives you additional marketplace. And of course, if you're through PSN, you can also gain access to central government or academia. And a good example here is if you look at the next generation of GPs, they're at uni. They require access to services, but they also may be studying for social care, which is on PSN. And they also may need access to clinical systems. The new network will enable that. Doesn't matter who you are and where you are, you can use the same assurance framework to gain access to resources government-wide. Does that answer your question? Right back. Oh, not David. No catching me out.
I was going to support your answer. With just to let you know that NHS Digital have just let a contract to write a new standard for care homes, which is supposed to be out in April, although I have serious doubts that they'll deliver in that timescale. So as well as I think there's 21 current information governance toolkit views, there is a new sequence of toolkit views coming out specifically for care over, most of the ones that are in there are health, they're derived from the health standards. The new set, which they've just let the contract for the development of, will be care-specific standards. So there is going to be, and there is in development now, a new set of information governance standards. It's specifically aimed really at care homes because the number of A&E attendances out of care homes is high, and they want to improve the standard to enable things like KNOS were showing this morning in terms of that interoperability standard. But those problem is getting picked up with the GDPR implementation. So there's some of the new legal storage standards are coming through, and those will come through probably in the summer.
And just to add to that, the IG toolkit, that's also, as we spoke about this morning, that's also being reworked. So expect towards the end of this year, that old archaic framework to be torn down and replaced with something far more, should we say, appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with AWS is, I mean, if you were going for Care Essentials or Care Essentials Plus, which would be the one you go for, what you've got to watch out for is your contract chain. So under GDPR, you've got to have a contract chain that enables you to say, if you've got an NHS or a public sector customer, they've got to be assured under DPA and under GDPR, you've got to have the appropriate chain of contracts. If you get the right settings in AWS, they will self-impose model clauses, but you've still got to have a contract with your client that makes your liability transparent through to AWS and the model clauses.
I know. Anton Murphy, Redcentric. I'm a business development manager, colleague of Mark Hall's. I'm responsible for our collaboration with AWS, and again, we thank them for allowing us to speak here. My main purpose in holding this was so that I could hold it. A couple of things. For the gentleman in front of me, we have a standard charging model for all AWS customers, obviously, because they like that consistency. So we have a standardized charging model, so please contact us afterwards, anyone in the room. We can issue that. First customers are contracting now and will be delivered in February. And that's the current status. And the other thing just to highlight is those that contract under M3, as we transition to HSCN, as they remain under contract, they'll be transitioned at no charge. Finally, we are aware that obviously a number in the room are software solution providers and some relatively small and startup organisations. So we try to keep, even though it's a legacy network that imposes a lot of conditions on us commercially, we try to be flexible. So the minimum entry point at the moment is 5 megabits and a 12-month contract term. And if anyone's used to working in M3, you can be assured that that is, significantly more flexible than is traditionally encountered in the M3 environment. So 5 megabit minimum. incremental scaling beyond that in increments of 1 megabit. So you have a charge model for 5 megabit as a minimum, and then a charge to increment that up per megabit. So it's nice and simple and transparent, and we hope cost effective, but of course you individually would be the judge of that. Thank you.
Can I just ask you about security? So you talked a little bit about encryption of data, yes. But the whole model still seems to be a perimeter type security system, which we know isn't right. And what will you be doing with data that is that you detect to be unencrypted?
In transit or at rest? In transit, the A&M service, which is Advanced Monitoring deployed by authority, quite strangely, they're not going to look inside SSL traffic. The current stance is that SSL 256 is the best requirement, but the minimum is 128. Redcentric as an aggregator, we don't mandate what you do. We suggest and recommend what the minimum standards are. A lot of applications now do that per se anyway. From IP VPN endpoint, we can deliver those if required, but suggested probably not.
And how are they going to detect encrypted malware then?
They're not. Which is the flaw in their art. Okay, we're all big boys in the room. So the A&M service is currently out in the wild. It's currently going through procurement. And some of the requirements there are being, shall we say, honed. Because one of the key statements in the documentation is that SSL traffic or encrypted traffic will not be inspected. So considering if you're going to perform an attack within the new network, you'd encrypt it to get around. It's a glaring, great big elephant in the room, which has been pushed back to them, and we, the industry, the sector, would like to think that they're going to address that in accordance. But it's not the first time I've been asked that question. Sorry.
Thank you. I enjoyed that. I'm Michael Eaton from Stratel, but for 10 years I was the director of the PSPA network.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to ask the question about the boundary points of, if you like, how far you can go. So the core network you've been contracted for is MPLS,
yep.
The boundaries of that.
As are the CNSPs.
I was going to say, does it flow all the way through?
It flows all the way through.
Okay, so you've actually got greater control and visibility.
Yeah, it's end-to-end. So dual stack 4 and 6, MPLS end-to-end, honouring of QoS throughout. So it pains me to say, but it's a network which carriers have been delivering for 20 years.
Yeah, no, true. But the other question is there any explicit mobility capability baked into the architecture?
Yes, mobility is baked into that as well, from a two-factor point of view or from a remote point of view. So whether you're looking at wireless on a trust, through remote access from a golf course for a GP, or through the rest of mobility entirely part of the HSCN network, yes. So CNSP, for an example, can deliver Ethernet, broadband, Wi-Fi, or mobile access, as we do now, actually.
Okay, and the final question for me, as you said, one of the things that we had 10 years ago was the issue about when is a student a doctor, when is a doctor, especially in NHS buildings, and when they transit back into the student halls was one of the biggest issues about still enabling them to have authenticated access to systems even though they're hanging out in a student residence. Yeah. Is that something that's been handled in the architecture?
It's being handled now, yes. I mean, you're familiar with CIS? It's the authentication system for NHS, so handles spine, SUS, ERS, etc. That is undergoing, actually Phil's working on it, it's undergoing a program of works at the moment which will take into consideration multiple governance regimes, should we say. But in addition to that, I think it's Alistair within Cabinet Office is talking to the guys through GDS in how to make that compatible. And that's what's taken about 3 years. If you look at the original program trail for this, in 2012, 13, we talk about HSNet. And then it was N4, and then PSNH. Because that duration has purely been because we've been trying to fit the governance frameworks together.